Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the June 2026 Water Conditions Monitoring Committee meeting. My name is Emily Adrid. I'm with the Colorado Water Conservation Board, and today we have presentations from the Colorado Climate Center and NRCS. But before we begin, I just wanted to provide an update for you all. The last Drought Task Force meeting was on June 1st, and at the Drought Task Force meeting, the task force members recommended to the governor to move to phase three of the drought response plan. And a few days later, the governor issued a press release saying that the state is now in phase three of the drought response plan, and he also declared a drought emergency. So I'm sure most of you or some of you have we're seeing that in the news, but just wanted to provide that update again here for you all. Um, and with that, I will ask, I know that some have already started to do it, but if you could please put your name and affiliation in the chat, please, that would be great. And I will pass it over to Russ.
Okie dokie. Get mine shared here. I can find my, oh, it's right there. Okay, good. You see that okay?
Yep.
Cool, cool. And I'll put the laser pointer on. Good. All right. Well, I will walk us through where the conditions sit in terms of the uh, drought and things for this water year in terms of temperature and precipitation and current drought status for the water year. There's a photo from Independence Pass 2 days ago, Sunday. So a little bit of snow up on those high peaks, but not very much. Okay, so we'll start with temperature, and this shows the kind of a walk through the water year up to this point in terms of temperature. There's the graph showing each individual day with respect to average temperature, and then the maps showing each month and where they ranked and what the temperature anomalies were there. So, as I think everyone on this call is familiar with, it's been an extremely warm water year, the warmest on record. We'll show some of those stats in a minute. May was not so extreme. It was, a bit warmer than average, but pretty close to, much closer to normal than any of the other months that we've had in the water year so far. But June is off to quite a warm start up to this point as well. And this shows the water year rank for temperature across the state. It's been, again, the warmest first 8 months of a water year in 131 years of records. Over 5 degrees warmer than the 30-year average. More than 6.5 degrees warmer than the 20th century average. 1.7 degrees warmer than the previous record warm statewide. And so you can see on the map everywhere in that dark brown color, it's been their warmest October through May period. A few spots where it's the second or third warmest, but statewide by a good margin, the warmest. Here's similar for precipitation, and now this is like the bank account of precipitation here. I actually had to adjust the axis to go down a little bit further so that you can see where the bars end up there. So this is, whether in an accumulated sense we're above or below average precipitation for the water year. You can see it was above average for a little while back in October with the big storm and the floods in Western Colorado then, and then it's been a pretty steady decline. We saw those storms in May that I'll talk more about in a couple minutes, did make some small dents, but now with June having been very dry thus far, those deficits are getting larger yet again. And here's what that looks like distributed around the state. So everywhere in this, second darkest brown color, it's been a top 10 dry water year. A few spots that it's the driest water year on record through the end of May, statewide, averaged up over the state, the seventh driest start to a water year. There hasn't been anywhere that's been unusually wet. Some areas that have been closer to average, like southwestern Colorado, because of the flood back in October. But then there's some very dry areas like the Central Mountains, some of the northeastern plains areas, parts of southern Colorado that are in the top 10, the top few driest water years through the end of May. Okay, so we'll take a look at May. May maybe seems a while ago now, but we can look back at some of what happened around the state in May. If we remember back, it really seems like a long time ago now, but we had a pretty good snowstorm with over 2 feet of snow up in the Estes Park area back in May. We had a big rainstorm, very localized, but very heavy rain out on the eastern plains with 2.5, 3 inches from that. There was hail on the eastern plains as we typically get in May, and big fire in Baca County back in May as well. So this is what that temperature rank map looks like for just the month of May. And this is probably the least interesting one of these maps we've had in a long time. There were parts of the state that were warmer than average, but on the whole, May ended up being a pretty average month in terms of temperature, which we haven't really had many of since last September. So, again, a bit warmer than average, but a pretty normal month as far as Mays go. And here's what it looked like for precipitation. Kind of a similar story. There were some spots that had quite good precipitation in May, and saw some at least short-term drought improvements, like across northern Colorado, up into North Park, parts of northwest Colorado, and then some spots that were dry in May, like the Four Corners region, parts of the mountains, and up in the Northeast. But again, for most of the state, it was a fairly average May, which doesn't go a long way to improving the drought conditions, but at least keeps them from getting worse when you have a month like that. And this is the quadrant chart that I think most folks here are probably familiar with. So it's precipitation on the horizontal axis, temperature on the vertical axis. If you're up in the upper right, that's the warm and dry, the drought quadrant. For May 2026, it was actually quite close to the middle, to the crossing point there of average temperature and precipitation. Just a little bit drier than average, just a little bit warmer than average, but pretty close to average overall. But if we zoom this back out then to the water year, October through May, then we still see how extreme this water year has been. Water year 2026, way up here in terms of temperature, again, by a pretty good margin, the warmest water year on record for the first 8 months, and in the top 10 driest over that period. An interesting point of comparison is 2002, which was by far the driest water year, or driest October through May period on record, but not nearly as warm as we've seen over the last 8 months. So I imagine when Nagum is going into some of the streamflow data, 2002 is a relevant point of comparison for some of the low stream flows that we're seeing this year and that were there in 2002. And then, again, May was a fairly normal month. April was warm, but not extremely warm. So the last 1 month and the last 2 months don't stand out so much in terms of temperature. But if you look at every other time scale from 3 months out to 60 months, it's been the warmest on record for Colorado statewide. So the spring season, March through May, warmest spring on record. The last 12 months, the warmest June through May period. The last 5 years have been the warmest 5-year period on record, ending in May. So that persistent warmth permeates through all of these timescales, going back, from the spring season all the way back to several years. Okay, so look at where things stand for June thus far. This is through yesterday morning, Monday morning, precipitation across the state. It's been very dry in Western Colorado for June. That's not super unusual. It's June is the driest month of the year in most of Western Colorado, so it's not that unusual to not see a lot of rain in June, but still it's been very dry. And then Eastern Colorado, as usual during the thunderstorm season, kind of a mix. Some spots have gotten the thunderstorms, some spots haven't. Some spots have been really dry, like parts of Southeast Colorado. So that's kind of where things stand for the first half of June. And here's where that looks as a percent of average precipitation. And so you can see some of those pockets of green that had thunderstorms or heavy rainstorms there, and then other pockets of brown where it hasn't rained. Again, Western Colorado has been very dry for June up to this point. And much of Eastern Colorado has also been very dry with some other pockets that have had heavy rain in there. And it's June has also been very warm in almost the entire state up to this point. The western slope, lower elevations, 5+ degrees above average for the first half of June. Some parts of the Eastern Plains have similar departure from average temperature. Other places not quite as extreme, but certainly a very warm start to June across the state. June has had some hailstorms as well. I know while those of us were up in Winter Park at the Drought Task Force meeting on June 1st, there was the big hailstorm that moved through the Denver metro area that made the snowplows come out in certain areas and cars getting stranded in the deep hail. And then a week later, on the 8th of June, there was also a big hailstorm that went through parts of the metro area. This is in the golf course in Evergreen that had golf balls for golf and hailstones that were golf balls at the same time. So a couple of substantial hailstorms on those days on the 1st and the 8th of June in the Denver metro area. Okay, let's take a look then at how this all fits into drought conditions. This was a picture I took on the CWCB drought tour on June 2nd of Williams Fork Reservoir, which is looking pretty low. Yeah, and I think that's probably the scene at quite a few reservoirs around the state right now. So here's the National Drought Monitor map as of last week. We can see much of the western U.S. in drought conditions, with Colorado having pockets of D3 and D4 drought, and other parts of the West seeing similar extreme to exceptional drought conditions. And here's the zoom in on Colorado. And so we see almost 9% of the state in D4, the exceptional drought category, over a third of the state in D3 or worse, extreme drought or worse, 75% in severe drought or worse, and then 95% of the state in drought, with just one tiny little pocket that had those big rainstorms out in Carson County in May and June, in nothing on the map, but almost the whole state in at least abnormally dry and 95% in some level of drought. Here's how the drought monitor map changed over the last month, over the last 4 weeks. Again, those areas that had good precipitation back in May up in northwestern Colorado saw 2 category improvements in those areas. They had a quite wet May, and even a wet April in some spots. So improvements there. Those parts of the Eastern Plains that had a good May and then have had active thunderstorms in recent weeks have also seen improvements. On the flip side, places where conditions have gotten worse include like Weld County that has been very dry over the last couple months, in addition to being dry for longer time frame than that. A lot of the southeastern plains, the San Luis Valley, parts of the western slope. So those areas have seen degradations on the drought monitor for the last month. We talked about this a bit at the Drought Task Force meeting. in terms of some of the metrics that are in the state hazard mitigation plan in terms of triggering, the various levels of the drought plan. And I thought this was kind of an interesting point of comparison. So the Palmer Drought Severity Index it has pros and cons like every drought indicator, but this is one that's been around for a long time that tends to emphasize longer term droughts. And what we see in terms of the monthly value at the end of May statewide, kind of averaged up over the state, is second only to the summer 2002 drought. So the only 2 months that have lower PDSI than at the end of May this year were July and August of 2002. And again, as we see the stream flow stats and so forth, 2002 is in many ways probably the worst drought that we've had in a lot of the state, and we're running right up near that, at least in terms of this indicator. This is the soil moisture conditions using the Western Land Data Assimilation System model that incorporates inputs of precipitation and temperature and soil moisture observations and so forth, and then runs the land surface model forward. So the left side is the shallower soil moisture, the top 10 centimeters of the soil. The right side is the deeper soil moisture, the top meter. And this is for historical percentiles going back to the early 2000s. In terms of the shallower soil moisture, very poor in the high country, parts of the western slope, parts of the eastern plains. The shallow soil moisture is lagging. Those are places that haven't had much rain recently. The deeper soil moisture is gonna integrate what's happened over a longer period of time, and we see that is looking bad across most of the state, with the exception of some of these spots that had really heavy rain last month or earlier this month, but a lot of poor soil moisture conditions around the state. And then if we add in the kind of combination of groundwater and soil moisture and snowpack and canopy moisture, that into this terrestrial water storage indicator, we see that now we're seeing the reflection of how bad the snowpack was, the deep soil moisture influences of that on groundwater over longer periods of time. Kind of the whole state is in this like second to fifth percentile. We don't actually have enough years of data for a second percentile to show up here. So in a lot of these places, it's at least the worst for this terrestrial water storage over the last 20-25 years around the state. So we still and one other thing to note here is this model doesn't really work in the urban areas. So the Denver metro is just masked out in gray there because the model doesn't really account for urban areas. But it's another indicator suggesting that water supplies are limited in various ways of looking at it. And we see that also in EDDI, evaporative demand. Over the last month, not so extreme. May was fairly normal, but if we look back over the last 6 months, it's going back to March, April, February, the evaporative demand has just been extremely high across most of the state over that longer time period. And over the last couple of weeks, with June being hot and dry, it's picking back up as well. I just wanted to highlight this condition monitoring report from near Sugar City in Crowley County in the COCORA's condition monitoring reports, and also encourage folks on the call here, if you're seeing or hearing drought impacts, you can submit them. If you're a COCORA's observer, you can submit them via COCORA's like this. If you're not, you can submit them to the National Drought Mitigation Center through the Seymour platform. But in any case, I think these reports are helpful and instructive to see what the conditions are like. So it's this triangle here. north of Sugar City, talking about how poor the rangeland is and very little precipitation in May and early June. Stock ponds are dry. Cattle producers are culling herds. Here's a photo of the rangelands there, which is looking pretty rough in that area. And we've been hearing other reports from that part of the state about how bad the conditions are as well. Okay, so where are we headed? We're probably not headed down a ski slope anytime soon, but we can take a look at where the outlook is pointing to going forward. So in the very near term, today and tomorrow, concerning fire weather conditions across western Colorado, it's going to be warm and dry and windy, and vegetation's drying out. So this is the time of year when, especially in a year like this one, where those fire danger concerns really come up, and then the next couple days are going to be, the kinds of days that we hope that fires don't get started, because they have the potential to grow quickly if they do. So that all the areas in pink there are in red flag warnings today, and most of them will be in red flag tomorrow, most likely as well. 7-day precipitation forecast doesn't look great. Through the rest of the work week, it's going to be basically no rain anywhere in the state. This weekend, rain chances return to some extent in eastern Colorado. We'll see how that plays out. But western Colorado is going to be dry for a while. Again, that's not super unusual for the end of June, late June. It's the dry time of year there, so but still it's going to be dry. Here's what that looks like as a difference from average. So again, you can kind of see in the Four Corners region, for example, the average precipitation in mid-June over a week is essentially zero. So it's not unusual to see zero precipitation at this time of year. Other like parts of the state, Front Range, Eastern Plains, this is a wetter time of year typically, and so you see larger departures from average when you have a week with no or little rain. We should be getting rain this time of year in these areas, and this just shows the breakdown over the days. So you can see again, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, dry. Saturday mostly dry, but you start getting some rain chances coming back Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Doesn't look like anything huge at this point, but we'll keep an eye on it and see where that may head. If we look at the 8 to 14 day period, so this is next week essentially, to the following weekend. It's going to stay warm over the western U.S. It's been very warm lately there, so I think western Colorado is going to stay much warmer than average. A little less clear as you get east of the divide. Shows a very slight tilt towards wetter than average conditions over that period. I think the rain chances will come back up after, once we get to next week. But we'll have to see how much that actually is. And this is a pretty low confidence forecast out there. And if we add those two together, the next 15 days, most of the models are pointing to drier than average conditions across western Colorado, maybe closer to average conditions across the Front Range and some of the mountain areas. Nowhere that looks especially wet over the next 2 weeks. So that's kind of where looks like we'll be in a fairly dry pattern for the next couple of weeks, although some rain will be possible once we get through and get towards this weekend and beyond. And then we can look at this in terms of the longer term outlook. So just as an important caveat here, NOAA's new seasonal outlooks will come out on Thursday this week. So these are a little bit old now, but it's the ones that are still in effect. This was the summer outlook, the June, July, August outlook that was issued in the middle of May. The dot there, the pin there is at Granby, just for a point of comparison for the pie charts here on the left. So above average, the odds tilted towards above average temperature for the summer season, at least if the first 2 weeks of June are an indication of how the rest of the summer goes, warmer than average. We're already on track for that. And then this is the precipitation outlook, which does tilt towards wetter than average. Um, all the indications have been that the monsoon season will be active. It'll be wetter than average. But remember, in Colorado, the monsoon season doesn't usually get started until, the second week of July or so. So the fact that it's dry in June, especially in Western Colorado, I don't think tells us much about how the monsoon season as a whole is going to play out. It's obviously dry right now, but all the indications continue to show that the monsoon will be active once it gets started. But we still got some time to wait for that. And keep an eye out for the new NOAA seasonal outlooks that come out on Thursday. Wildfire risk is high. The USDA outlooks continue to show above average risk for significant wildfires in June and also in July. Those red areas come down, get a little bit smaller as we get into August, with the expectation that maybe the monsoon will be helpful in that regard. And then the longer term is the interest in El Nino. That was the NOAA declared officially last week that El Nino conditions are in place now. It's expected that this will be a strong El Nino, possibly one of the strongest ones that's ever been observed. This graph on the right shows the probability of the strength of the El Nino, and you can see, so basically where this brown bar is the probability of a very strong El Nino, and it's a like more over 60% chance of being a strong El Nino by a very strong El Nino by winter. What does this mean for us in Colorado? The water supplies, as we'll hear from Nagam, are awful, and this is not going to fix that situation. But it maybe does give us some hope for later summer and the fall, maybe an active monsoon season leading into a wetter fall, that we won't be, continuing into just more and more dry months through the rest of this year. I think that's what the outlooks are pointing to. But the near term situation is still quite serious. This is an updated map that Peter put together recently with some more years of data. We've shown ones like this in the past, but this includes some more years, and it's the relationship between El Nino or La Nina and precipitation in Colorado. So if you see green on these maps, it means that El Nino years tend to be wetter during that season. If you see blue on the map, there's only a little bit of blue in winter. It means La Nina tends to be wetter in that season. And so what we see that in summer, when El Nino emerges, the northeastern part of the state tends to be wetter than average in summer during El Nino. Most of the state tends to be wetter than average in fall during El Nino. So this is partly why we're somewhat optimistic that things will move in a better direction as we get later into the year and as the El Nino strengthens, because it does tilt our odds towards wetter than average conditions. Not a guarantee by any means, and the seasonal forecasts are always somewhat uncertain, but I think it does provide at least a little bit of a positive view as we get out towards late summer into fall. And this is consistent with NOAA's drought outlook also, which a new one of these will come out on Thursday also, but it's suggesting that for most of Colorado, drought remains but improves by the end of August. So we'll see how this plays out when we get to the end of summer, but that's kind of what the outlooks are pointing towards. So takeaways: the water year through May has been by far the warmest on record and among the top 10 driest for Colorado. It's kind of the top line takeaway in these presentations every month now. May itself was more normal, with temperatures pretty close to average, and some parts of the state got really beneficial rain. Other parts didn't get so much rain. Drought continues to affect most of this, essentially the entire state. River flows are extremely low. Wildfire risk is increasing. The next couple of weeks are going to be dry and warm. So these drought impacts of the low water supply are going to continue through the near term. But looking out beyond that, El Nino is, well, it's not even likely. It's here now. By the summer, it's potentially going to be strong, and that plus a potentially active monsoon season gives some reason for optimism in the longer term, even though the short term impacts are going to be considerable. So that's what I've got. There is our my contact info, our website, how you can subscribe to our things if you don't already get them. And I will stop there and happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thanks, Russ. Looks like Peter has a question. Does El Nino guarantee improvements? Softball for
Thanks,
you.
thanks, Peter. No guarantees. When it comes to El Nino, and Peter can probably answer the question better than he knows the answer to this better than I do. Yeah, never any guarantees, and especially where we sit in Colorado with the signal for El Nino is quite strong to our south. Like the southern tier of states tend to be cooler and wetter than average during falls and winters in El Nino, and the opposite for like the northern tier of states and up into Canada. We sit right in the middle, so it's always a more of a wild card here in Colorado than it is in other places. I mean, we're seeing right now like Texas is getting tons of rain, but we're obviously not getting any of that here. So yeah, there's never any guarantees with this, but I think it at least it tilts the odds in a better direction than what we've had over the last year or so.
Yeah, those new El Nino correlation maps make El Nino look so good, and we need the rain so bad, and I'm just so worried that it's going to make me look really stupid.
I have another question about El Nino. Is there a reason why this year's El Nino is so strong? I think, I mean, is it because, is it due to climate change raising the sea surface temperatures or
So that's a piece of it. So
okay.
the ocean temperatures in the Pacific are really warm, in part due to global warming. But even if you look at the like how warm those temperatures are expected to get with like removing that global warming trend, they're still going to be really warm. But like way warmer than average is what all the models are pointing to by the time we get to fall and winter. So it's kind of a combination of like it's going to be a really big El Nino, and then like you add global warming on top of that, and it's even warmer. And I think this is sort of the challenge I think we're having in thinking about this and communicating this, because like from a global perspective, having a super El Nino is not a good thing. Like there's going to be, temperature records broken, lots of places. There's going to be places that have awful droughts and awful floods and all this. But like in Colorado, it's kind of good news for us because it means it's less likely that we stay in these long-term drought conditions. So that's, it's like we're happy to see it coming, I think, here, but there's a lot of places where they are not going to be happy to see a really strong El Nino coming, if that makes sense.
And adding on to what Emily was asking, Russ, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think when we look at those sea surface temperature anomalies and the possibility of getting above 2C, above normal, that's detrended, right? So
Yes.
and it's not detrended perfectly. We can't always tell the signal from the noise perfectly, and that's been a big topic of discussion in the kind of further north in the Pacific with the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, as you have this blob in the northern Pacific that's been really warm for a long time, and since that oscillation's slower, it's harder to tell if that's a trend or related to the PDO, but yeah, they are detrended. So and that's we tend to think that that's appropriate to do because the relationship between ENSO and the behavior of the atmosphere is really driven by the relative difference in sea surface temperatures between the eastern equatorial Pacific and western equatorial Pacific. So we would expect to see at a higher or lower baseline, perhaps a similar effect on atmospheric behavior in an El Nino, even though things are detrended. But that also may not be a perfect assumption.
Yeah, and we haven't really had a super El Nino with global temperatures as warm as they are now. So
Yeah.
it's, there will probably be things that happen that are different from how they've been in the past. And we just don't have that many points of reference for these really strong El Ninos in the past either. So it's another reason why there's no guarantee of what we're going to see.
Gotcha. Thanks, Russ and Peter. Um, let's see, there's a couple of questions in the chat.
I see Phil's question there. I'll put the links there after
Okay, sounds
after
good.
we finish. Oh, and I see. Yeah, so a great question there from Catherine about whether El Nino brings warm temperatures. Again, globally, yes, but here in Colorado, the El Nino years in the last few decades have tended to be our cooler years in Colorado. So yeah, like globally with a strong El Nino, so there will be lots of news reports that like probably, we'll see where 2026 ends up, or maybe 2027 ends up being the warmest year on record globally. But here in Colorado, we tend to get those tend to be our cooler years. But again, bringing back to the previous conversation, those are cooler years in the context of warming overall. So, a cool year now is warmer than what we would have thought a cool year was in the past. And yeah, most
Awesome.
of those signals are for like fall and winter, not really for summer so much.
Great. Well, thanks, Russ. If there are any more questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. And I think we can move on to Nagam. Thank you again, Russ and Peter. Hi, Nagam. Oh, I'm seeing myself. I can't hear you. We can't hear you. No, we can't hear you. Okay, looks like Nagam is going to rejoin the meeting. Thank you, Russ, for putting the monitoring link in the chat. Yes, I guess there are two. Coco Ross is for um, Colorado. Oh gosh, I'm gonna butcher that acronym, but the Seymour is for the National Drought Mitigation Center, which produces or which helps produce the U.S. Drought Monitor maps every month. All right, well, I see some more questions in the chat. The second part of Catherine's question regarding snowpack. Looks like Peter was able to answer that
Peter
question
got that
there.
one.
Yeah. Hey, Nagam.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome, good. Okay.
Okay, I just
Just
allowed you to share your screen.
perfect. Can you see my slide?
Yes. It's
Cool.
not in presenter view though.
Okay, from the beginning. Okay, awesome. Thank you for your
Hmm.
patience there. All right. Um, so I'll just start with an overview of statewide conditions as of yesterday. Snowpack is at 8% of the 30-year median. Water year to date precipitation's at 75% compared to 87% this time last year. 30 days, 83%, largely from May precipitation, and not June as we're in a dry period, as Russ has pointed out. And I'll show those in other graphs here in just a moment. And then on the IMAP on the right also displays 30-day precipitation. So from May 16th through June 14th. The southwest corner, kind of, doing the worst there at 42% of median, the Gunnison at 57, the eastern half of the state doing very much better, and central Colorado and northwest Colorado still below median there. Observed stream flow March through May is 50% of the period of record median. If we remove March, just because that's outside of the normal primary period, typically, or it is. So April through May then drops down to 40% for observed stream flow. March alone, 140, April, 62%, and May, 33% of median. And then I'll move into forecasts. So outlooks for the remaining, for the forward-looking period, so June through July. At the 50% exceedance, forecasts are at 24% of median. Looking at the wetter projection, so 30% exceedance forecasts, percentages increased to 33, so just slightly there. And then the drier outlook at 70% drops down to 18% a median. And then I'll cover reservoir storage. So May end of month reservoir storage is at 75% of median. We started the water year out at 103%, so that carryover has definitely certainly been helpful. And then soil moisture is around 80%. So for both our shallower 8-inch and 20-inch, so 81% for the 20 and 77 for the 8-inch. And I'll show where soils are headed now and kind of into their drier phase at the moment for each basin at the end here. Okay, so first, an overview of snowpack. This black line here is our current water year, 2026. I put in some analog years as well, so 2002 and 2012. So currently, as of June 15th, statewide, and this is, sorry, for statewide overview, we're at 0 inches for SWE. The median this time of year is typically 4/10 of an inch. Our peak SWE this year was March 8th at 8.5 inches, so half of normal, which is typically early April, and that is 16.7. For 2002, peak was closer to the normal date, so early April, and that was above this year, so at 10 inches for 2002 and 2012. The peak timing was similar to our current water year, early March, and that was at around 12 inches. So here it's just, this is an overview, just kind of month to month, how things kind of shaped up for snowpack. So at the start of the water year, we had pretty large deficits in October and November. And then snowpack started to build in December, and the departure decreased. Not too far from normal, still a deficit, but at that point, not nearly enough to, make up for what had already transpired at the start of the water year. And then January, February, the primary accumulation period, those were also some pretty large deficits, with March being the largest, with that 79% departure from normal. April, that decreased, and then May, we did really well, particularly in the Front Range and eastern half of the state, so like the Sangres, Front Range and Northern Mountains up there are a big driving force of this number here. So I'll show that in just a moment. Okay, I'm moving into precip. So water year to date precipitation, this is October 1st through yesterday, is at 75% of median. We can see the southwest corner here is has the highest number, 85% of median. But then when I remove October, so November through May 31st, that drops down to 67%, and all southern basins drop pretty dramatically there. If we, removing that October flooding event, the central northern basins kind of not too big of a change there with that different perspective or time frame. So May precipitation is at 94% of median. And again, this shows the eastern half of the state doing really well. Western, so, well below median there. Southwest corner at 44%. So the sites in the Sangres here did really well for May. And then in the Front Range, all above normal. And as Russ noted, that's not too, abnormal for this time of year. For near normal, above normal precipitation for that particular basin, the South Platte and Laramie and North Platte there. Okay, and then June month to date precipitation, so June 1st through June 15th, that drops down to 14% of median. The Upper Rio Grande, however, like in the San Luis Valley, has received a bit of moisture. So that's the outlier there at 91%. And then Arkansas and southwest corner there are also doing relatively better compared to the northern half of the state and the Gunnison Basin. Okay, and then this is just same perspective, monthly perspective for departures and medians by month for precipitation. So it's a little different, but October, we can see that flooding event here, primarily in the southern basins and the sand, the southern basins there. And then deficits increase, in November. So typically, you can see that noted there, kind of back down near normal come December, and then decreased again in January and February, and then March was the worst for the snow primary accumulation period. April, we had cooler weather and some improvements back still below normal, but not too far off there. And then May, just above normal at 2.45 inches compared to median of 2.44. All right, moving into stream flow. Okay, so this is observed stream flow, 3-month view, so March through May. And so the aggregate value is 50% of median statewide. The South Platte kind of leading at 50% there, and Upper Rio Grande as well at 59. But then removing, this is just the March view. So this just, I wanted to highlight how above normal stream flow was for the March period. So 140% of median, typically because we don't have runoff that early. So that just gives highlights that point of view there. So the entire the western slope, well above normal. South Platte and Arkansas runoff wasn't as extreme for those particular basins, but the western half of the state certainly well above normal, and the same kind of trend throughout that for the whole upper Colorado region there. Okay. These plots are helpful. They're available on our water supply tab on our NWCC apps page. And they're available for every forecast point. So this is for the Colorado River near Cisco. I pulled this particular one. It's in Utah, but it's where the Colorado River has met up with the Gunnison, and also the confluence for the Dolores. So it's, two basins and a sub-basin there. So it, and it captures trends for the whole, for a great portion of the western slope, or similar trends throughout the region. So for this particular point, we can see, okay, let me just back up here because it's been a minute since I've introduced these. So what this graph allows us to see is just the evolution of the forecast throughout the season. So from January through June 1st. And yeah, just that progression. We can see the error, the spread between points, is pretty large at the start of the season. That's common. And then that will narrow as the season progresses, and we have more inputs. And then you can just see, where things are trending upwards or downwards, downwards in this case. So for June 1st, observed stream flow was 547,000 acre feet, so CAF there. And the outlook for the season, the primary period, is 897. So the primary period for these, they don't capture March. So I went ahead and added them for when, on the slides that I did use. So for March, we observed 244,000 acre feet. So that 244 is not in this 897 number here. So just something to be mindful of when you're, looking over these plots. And then the June through July outlook at the 50% outlook. So, if we have normal weather, is 350 CAF, and that's roughly 30% of remaining volume for this particular point. So if we total that up, that would potentially rank this water year at third, but not too far off from the lowest ranking, which is 2002, and then 1977 behind that, and then 2026. But as you can see with these dots right here, the probabilities, the exceedance probabilities, they're all kind of like at least the 50, 70, and the low, they're stacked up on top of each other nearly. So the minimum is 883 for this period, April through July. So a lot of information there, but yeah, let me know if there's any questions on that later. Okay, so then I took the same point and I'm looking at this here with our snow to flow charts. And so what this chart allows us to see is just the relationship between snowpack and runoff. And I've also noted 2002 an analog year here. So so the black line, the black solid line is snowpack. The black that's for the current water year. The black dashed line is also our current water year, but that is stream flow in CFS. So we had I just noted our first peak for, again, this is a Colorado River near Cisco. First peak in early March, I'm so sorry. Our snowpack peak was early March at 8.8 inches. And then we had a peak following that heat wave in March, at the end of March at 10, my goodness, sorry guys. There's a lot on here to make you go cross-eyed, and I added more to help with that. So down here for stream flow, we have, this is also during the March period. This dash line, we had a peak at the end of March and also just early April. So this dramatic drop here is that accelerated melt period that we observed. And then we had a peak here for this particular point, and then some snow with some cooler weather, and then another peak. So this was the definitive peak for this particular point at 4620. And then some cooler weather through April and May, and then another peak in May, which is not uncommon, or just to see a rise in stream flow there. So the median peak for stream flow is typically in early June. Still well, ahead of that for this particular point, is my main takeaway for this slide. And then I have a pie chart here on the right, just demonstrating the distribution for stream flow for this year. So March, we received 21% of volume. Typically, we receive 6%. And then June and July normally account for around half. We usually typically have half of our volume remaining, and this year, for this point, it's around 30. And that's primarily because things have been shifted forward into as early as March. Okay, here's another point, the Rio Grande near Del Norte. This one is still well below median as far as outlooks go for the remaining period, June through July. So we're looking at around 65,000 acre feet for the June through July period in total. So again, this is from May. For some reason, April wasn't listed here, but so for this particular chart, this number is reflecting the May through September runoff value at 124,000 acre feet. The minimum is 95. And we are above that for the 50% projection as of now. And I've also noted here the March runoff at 33 calf, and that was 151% of median, and then 42 calf at 86% of median for April. Okay, and then also here's the snow to flow plot for that same point, Rio Grande near Del Norte. Similar trend. Main difference here is we have our October flooding event we can see, and yeah, snowpack peaking towards middle of March, early March there. And then stream flow has peaked around early mid-May, right here where my highlighter's at, and is just a little ahead of schedule, which is typically in June. So still ahead of normal there. And we can see here also stream flow starting to recede. 2002 is also highlighted. It's difficult to see on the previous map, but you can see it a little more clearly here. So dash line, green line is 2002. Peaked a little later in 2002, but well below this year. So, okay. Now getting into forecasts, this is the 50% exceedance probability for the primary period, or the forward-looking period, excuse me. And that's at 24% of median, ranging from 19% to 23% on the western slope, 28% in Upper Rio Grande, The eastern half of the state doing a little better at 37 in Arkansas and 51 in the South Platte. And these are this is a percentile view for the state, so you know, well below median there. I think the median percentile is around 2 statewide. And although there's not, you know, records exactly for, you know, June and July, they are still, you know, on the lower end of the historical distribution there. Okay, these are our forecast exceedance probability charts. I'm going to zoom in. Can I do that? I can do that. So this is for the South Platte. There's a lot of information here. So I have this plot listed by acre feet, 1,000 acre feet here. So, and then the percent of median is down at the bottom for comparison. The minimum years are noted in red, and normals are here in green. So generally, the forward-looking period is June through July, but there's also, you know, in the northern basins, particularly the South Platte, also that period is June through September. So there's 2 there, just to note. And yeah, so you can go through each of these points here. We can see the minimum, sorry, the minimum year for this particular, for the South Platte is 2002. And forecasts are above that, but still well below median. Hovering around, yeah, that 50% of median for most of these points. Zoom out since I don't need to be in that close for Arkansas. Okay, so the Arkansas also for the forecast period, it's June through July and June through September as well. Yeah, so still well below normal, noted here with these green markers. And then the minimum for the Arkansas is 2002 at a lot of points, also seeing 1963, 1946, but primarily 2002. Forecasts at the 50% outlook are largely above the minimum. Getting into the drier outlooks, they do start to set new records there. Oh goodness, sorry guys. Okay. So these are forecast charts for the Yampa White Little Snake on the left. There's a lot of information here. That's why I need to zoom because I'm having a hard time seeing it. Okay. So yes, same story, below normal for all outlooks. 50% outlooks, you know, depends on the point. Some set records and then some are near that. And this is the 50%'s hovering in the, you know, between the 10 to 20% percent of median category for the Yampa White and Little Snake. In the Upper Rio Grande, percent of medians are also in that 20% range. The minimum year is also 2002 for the most part for the Upper Rio Grande. Okay, and then lastly, actually, I think I have 2 more. The Colorado headwaters minimum year, also 2002. Even the wetter scenarios are well below median there. And the 50% outlooks like Williams Fork below Williams Fork Reservoir, that's the 50% is going to be is going to be the new minimum potentially. If Okay, and then the Laramie and North Platte, the minimum year is 2002. Yeah, generally the same story throughout the state there. So just wanted to provide these. So if you want to go through and look at them on a closer view, these are absolutely helpful just to get every single forecast point for each basin into one view. Yeah. Okay. Now moving into reservoirs, reservoir storage at the end of May is 75% of median. South Platte and Arkansas are still below median, but not as bad relative to the rest of the state. So 90% in the South Platte, Arkansas at 91. Western Slope, well below median in that southwest corner, doing the worst at 69%. Here is another one of those evolution plots, but this particular point is for the Pueblo Reservoir inflow. So we started off the water year at 114% for Pueblo Reservoir, and then at the end of May at 93% of median. So this one, I just wanted to note, it's doing slightly better compared to the rest of the larger reservoirs in the state. Outlook for the forward-looking period, June through September, is 118,000 acre feet, and that's 42% of median. And so far, observed from starting as of April through May, we've observed 16,800 acre feet. And then also March, 13.8 thousand acre feet at 58% of median. So runoff wasn't nearly as high compared to the Western Slope in the Arkansas Basin. So there's still a decent portion of runoff remaining for the forward-looking period for this point. Okay, these are departures for the Gunnison Reservoir storage view. And the pink line is Blue Mesa Reservoir departures. The green is the total, so the aggregate. And this is around 250,000 acre feet for this particular basin. So Blue Mesa being the larger one, being the bigger driver for that large deficit in the Gunnison Basin. And this combined San Miguel, Dolores, Animas, and San Juan Basin, I have 3 departures noted here. So the total is this blue line right here, and that's around 600,000 acre feet. The larger reservoirs in this combined basin are McPhee, which is this blue line up here. So that has a deficit around near 200 calf, and then the green line is Navajo, and has a departure closer to 450 or so. South Platte Reservoir storage as a whole is doing fairly well. So instead of the departure view, this is just percents of median. We can see there's a few reservoirs that are above normal, and then near normal, and then also quite a few below normal as well. But as a whole, not as low or high of a deficit compared to other basins for reservoir storage. Okay, and then moving into soils. So this is the water year view for soils, and I have them listed by basin. So the top one is for the Arkansas, and we are moving into our drier period, as we can see. However, this is just drier than normal. So below median as far, and this is for percent saturation, and it combines the 8-inch and 20-inch for percent saturation. So Arkansas is moving towards the below record there or for this period. Up in the Upper Rio Grande, also trending into the drier phase, but again in below normal. The green line is our median for the period of record. So and the black is our current water year, and that's below the median. So similarly in the Gunnison, below median, and then in the southwest corner, not too far from normal. Soils in this combined basin tend to be composed of more like clay and hold more moisture, so we can just see that they typically just trend wetter in general. But it is soils in this combined basin are trending or moving into their drier phase as well. Okay, and then the Colorado headwaters, well below median into record low area, and in the combined Yampa White Little Snake in below median as well. And then in our northern basins, in the South Platte, in Laramie, North Platte, near median in the South Platte, and well below median or record low in the northern part of the state for soil moisture. Okay, so just to summarize, median meltout timing averaged 36 days ahead of normal, with peak timing in early March, and then that accelerated melt in March. May precipitation is near normal statewide at 94%, with eastern basins being favored, so particularly the Front Range and eastern half of the San Luis Valley. Observed stream flow March through May is 50% of median statewide. April and May alone are 41%, since March runoff occurred outside the normal primary period. June through July forecasts are at 24% of median at the 50% exceedance probability. Statewide, with western slope basins ranging from 19 to 23%, and then reservoir storage statewide is at 75% of median, and that number's we've largely benefited from October precipitation in southern basins, and then previous water year carryover as well. Western slope reservoirs are well below the statewide median. Yep, that's all I have.
All right. Any questions for Naga? I do have a question for you. Is it fair to say that this year's snowpack accumulation has been the lowest on record? Because I know that I feel like I'm wanting to make sure I get that right.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. Any any other questions?
Unfortunately, the ones that I just showed, sorry, John Winchester asked about those soil moisture graphs. Those ones are not, but I would be happy to share them with you if you would like. You can get a view of soil moisture from the iMap, but it's the map view.
Would you mind putting that link in the chat, Naga?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
iMap view. That way.
Yeah, whatever is accessible.
Okay, cool.
Okay, Angela put a note in the chat. Hey, Angela. Yeah, would you mind? I saw you
I
just come
mean,
off mute.
yeah, I wrote it out just to explain it sort of, but and we could even do this live if we want, but it is interesting if you sum the monthly SWE numbers, 2026 is actually a little bit higher than I think 2002 in total.
Okay.
But but that doesn't really matter a ton because we lost so much of our snowpack so early, I think.
Right.
But in terms of like being able to make statements, and I don't know, maybe Russ or someone else can check me on that, but yeah, if you do, and I don't know how reliable, like the difference is maybe like within a margin of error as well.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that is helpful. Um, yeah, yeah. I don't know, Russ, you or Peter, if you're still on, if you have any input on that
Yeah, I
as
mean,
well.
if you look at I'm not sure. I mean, it probably depends on exactly what you look at, also,
Mm,
Angela, but that's not like if you look at the long-term snow courses, that's not the answer you get. But it is the the delta between this year and 2002 does look much smaller if you kind of, yeah, like take the March or the April 1st numbers and the May 1st numbers and the March 1st numbers and kind of find the maximum between all of them. Like I think you can make 2002 look a little higher depending on how you slice and dice it, or make look a little lower. You can make this year look a little lower. But yeah, the March part was not, there's nothing ever like that in the record.
okay. That's helpful. Thanks, Angela and Russ. It looks like Nagam put the link to those soil moisture maps in the chat there. Um, awesome. Well, thank you, Russ and Nagam. I think I will turn it over to you all now. I'd love to hear updates from um, your corner of the state, how conditions are looking, and um, yeah, I guess I'll turn it over to you all now. And I'm also not afraid to call on people because I see some folks. Hey, Nathan.
Day. Not too much change for us. Our storage 81% full. We've basically been gaining and losing about 10 acre feet per day over the last 4 days. So we're just kind of bouncing. So we're pretty much topped out at that level. And with the hot temperatures coming in, I think this is our peak storage. So we're about 2% above where we were expecting to be. The 79 versus 81%. Still not great, and we're looking at somewhere between 57% and 71% full going into uh, next spring. So, and, our this is long term for us. Our expectations will be on some level of drought restrictions next spring, and just looking to see what um, snowpack's gonna bring for the 2026-2027 season.
Sounds good. Thanks, Nathan.
Yep.
Anyone else?
Hey, this is Emily Carbone at Northern Water. So our storage is currently at 75% full. Our June 1st storage was below average and it's the lowest it's been since 2014. We do expect these deficits to increase over the summer, especially in June, because most of our basins peak in June normally, but they peaked in May this year. So we do expect that deficit to increase significantly. That's what I got.
Thanks, Emily. Feels like everything happened a month early this year. Hey, Drew.
Hey everybody. City of Westminster, our storage is up 96, 97%. That Cooler weather over the past month and change really helped out. Thank you, Nathan. We actually took a little more Denver Water Moffett contract than we normally do, so that had offset any of the demands that we had been seeing, which allowed our reservoir levels to come up even more. Based on that, and fingers crossed on the El Nino, Super El Nino related things, I think we're probably going to stay in drought watch right now, which is our voluntary 3 day per week. I don't foresee that changing through the rest of the summer, but TBD. So I think things are pretty okay here, as considering like how bad it could have been back in February and March, right? When it
Hmm.
was the hottest, driest months on record. That was very scary.
Hmm.
Things have tempered a little bit.
That's great. Thanks, Drew.
Morning, Ethan Bravo, Colorado Springs Utilities. Our storage is about 77% of capacity, which is about our average or normal. That means 3 years of demands in storage system wide, even though, well, our yields are pretty low for this time of the season. We keep watching our storage. Thank you.
Got it. Thank you. Anyone else have an update for today? All right, well, that might be all. Thank you all for joining. And I will see you in July. And our meeting in July is on the 21st. So thanks to Russ and Nagam, and I will see you all next month.